A pro-Donald Trump super PAC put out its first ad in the Alabama Senate race Thursday, going after Democrat Doug Jones as being extreme on abortion. Jones supports abortion in even the most extreme circumstances, including gruesome late-term and partial birth abortions that are banned in countries across the world, says the narrator in the ad from Great America Alliance, which started during the 2016 election to support Trump's run for president. The 30-second spot shows Jones standing in a scary, dingy room and calls him deceptive and dangerous. It will be running on TV beginning next week. The ad centers on an MSNBC interview Jones did on September 27. Host Chuck Todd asked Jones what limitations he believes there should be when it comes to abortion. "I am a firm believer that a woman should have the freedom to choose what happens to her own body," Jones said. "And I'm going to stand up for that, and I'm going to make sure that that continues to happen." More from the interview. Todd: "But you wouldn't legislate, so you wouldn't be in favor of legislation that said ban abortion after 20 weeks or something like that?" Jones: "No, I'm not in favor of anything that is going to infringe on a woman's right and her freedom to choose. That's just the position that I've had for many years. It is a position that I continue to have. But when those people, I want to make sure people understand that once a baby is born, I'm going to be there for that child. And that's where I become a right-to-lifer." Jones has made no secret of his support for women's reproductive rights. On September 23, he posted a photo of himself at a Planned Parenthood event. Republicans supporting Jones' opponent, the far-right conservative Roy Moore, have gone on the attack about Jones' abortion views. Terry Lathan, the chair of the Alabama Republican Party, said she'd be thrilled if Planned Parenthood would come to the state to campaign for Jones. "I would encourage outside groups to come to Alabama that support the Democrat nominee. Planned Parenthood, MoveOn.org, who has already endorsed him, Hollywood elites and any Clinton available would be more than welcome to remind our voters who the Democrats are." Elizabeth Beshears, a communications consultant in Alabama who identifies as a libertarian, said she has been surprised to see that the Jones campaign hasn't responded more forcefully to the burgeoning abortion attacks. "You know this is going to be used against you, so respond quickly," she said. "It just seems more like a tactical error on the side of the Jones campaign than an actual policy position. If the Republicans say enough, it'll become true, whether it is or not," she added. "Which is why it's so important to get out there as quickly as possible and refute the narrative that is trying to be built." Jones has so far tried to focus his campaign on what he calls kitchen table issues like education, jobs, and healthcare, although he hasn't shied away from taking progressive positions on social issues which inevitably come up with more in the race. As the former Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, Moore made a national name for himself by being socially conservative. He said Alabama didn't have to abide by a U.S. Supreme Court ruling saying marriage equality is the law of the land, and he defied a federal judge's order to remove a Ten Commandments monument from the state judicial building. Moore has advocated the concept of personhood, which believes that fertilized eggs, zygotes, embryos and fetuses are persons and have full legal protections. In other words, a woman has no right to an abortion. Steve Bannon, who left the White House to return as chairman of Breitbart News, has been a vocal backer of Moore's. That put him at odds with the GOP establishment, including Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, RKY, who were backing Senator Luther Strange, RALA, in the primary. Both the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the McConnell-backed Senate Leadership Fund, which supported Strange, have said they have no plans to put money into the race to help Moore. Doug Jones' best chance is to get people who have a distaste for Moore out to vote for him regardless of the social issues. "The numbers are there, if he does it right," Beshears said, noting there are still moderate Republicans in the state who are considering having a Democrat in office rather than Moore representing Alabama on the national stage. Part of that calculation is that Jones may be there for just 2 years to fill out the term, and then after that, in the regular election, a more mainstream Republican will run and be able to retake the seat Jeff Sessions vacated to become Trump's attorney general. The general election to fill the seat is December 12. Update, 8:03 p.m. The Jones campaign commented on the ad in a statement to HuffPost. Roy Moore and his allies will do anything to distort this race and lie about my position. This is a deeply personal decision. I support the current law on a woman's freedom to choose, which has been in place for decades, where late-term abortions are permitted to protect the life or health of the mother. Roy Moore is the one with extreme views on women's rights. He'd change the law and take Alabama backward. Moore would force a woman to carry a pregnancy to term even if she is the victim of rape or her life is in danger. Want more updates from Amanda Turkle? Sign up for her newsletter, Piping Hot Truth, here. Senators Lamar Alexander, R10, and Patty Murray, D-Wash, on Thursday formally introduced their proposal to shore up the Affordable Care Act's private insurance markets. And in a show of the proposal's bipartisan strength, they announced the bill now has 24 sponsors, with precisely 12 from each party. It will take that kind of support to push the proposal through Congress, given many Republicans' feelings about anything related to Obamacare, not to mention the contradictory statements President Donald Trump has made lately. But both Alexander and Murray are acting like their proposal could still become law at some point, and there is good reason to think they are right. The bill, which emerged from hearings and negotiations that Alexander and Murray convened over the course of the past few weeks, would restore several $1 billion worth of subsidies to insurers that Trump cut off last week. In addition, it would appropriate about $100 million in funding for enrollment and outreach again, effectively replacing money that Trump took away. At the same time, the bill would allow insurers to sell catastrophic policies, with extremely high out-of-pocket expenses in exchange for lower premiums, to consumers of all ages rather than only to consumers who are younger than 30, as the law currently allows. The bill would also make it easier for states to tweak some of the Affordable Care Act's regulations. None of the changes the bill contemplates are particularly dramatic. It's really a series of small wins and concessions for each side, in the hopes of keeping coverage more affordable and available at least for the next few years at a time when, for reasons that reflect both the Affordable Care Act's design and recent management of it, consumers in many states are facing higher prices and dwindling choices. It's precisely the kind of bill both Alexander and Murray had said they wanted to write. In successive remarks from the Senate floor, the two senators, one the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee chairman, the other the committee's ranking Democratic member, praised each other for diligence and an open mind. It sends a powerful message that when members of Congress decide to get past the talking points and take just a few steps out of partisan corner, there's really a lot we can agree on and a lot we can get done, Murray said. But it's been years since such bipartisanship was typical, particularly on the polarizing issue of health care. Many Republicans refuse to even consider supporting legislation that might bolster or be seen to bolster a law they have spent 7+ years vowing to rip out, root and branch. And then there is Trump, who has sent so many wildly inconsistent signals it's difficult to keep track of them. In just the past few days, he seemed to change his mind on multiple occasions at various points, praising the Alexander Murray plan publicly, only to announce, in some cases hours later, that he could never back a bill that includes a bailout of insurance companies. In his floor remarks, Alexander addressed the bailout argument directly. He pointed out that the payments Trump cut off, known as cost-sharing reductions or CSRS, merely reimburse insurers for special low-deductible policies that they must, by law, offer to poor and some middle-class consumers. Alexander went on to say that the bill includes a whole section on making sure a restoration of the CSRS ends up benefiting consumers, not insurers. The president says there should be no bailout of insurance companies, Alexander said. I agree 100%. Alexander also told his fellow Republicans that endorsing his bill was not tantamount to giving up on repeal. As proof, he noted that among the GOP CO sponsors are Senators Bill Cassidy, R. Law, and Lindsey Graham, RS.C., who have pledged to keep working on the repeal package they tried but failed to get through the Senate in September. Besides, Alexander said, holding out for full repeal hasn't worked so well for Republicans so far. Someone said that this bill is not enough, Alexander said. Well, it's more than we've gotten for 8 years and it's the first step. Both Alexander and Murray spoke about the bill as if it could offer immediate relief on premiums. In reality, insurers and state regulators have already settled on rates for next year, and in most cases they have done so in ways that will shield the majority of consumers from the immediate effects of Trump's cutoff. That's largely because other forms of financial assistance will automatically be increased to compensate for cuts in the insurer subsidies. One ironic result is that the federal government will end up spending more money, not less, unless and until the federal government restores the insurer subsidies, a point Alexander noted in his appeal to fellow Republicans. But if Alexander Murray becomes law and the subsidies start flowing again, the proposal envisions insurers paying back any extra money they receive, through rebates to consumers or the federal government or both. In addition, passing the bill could have a profound effect on the mentality of insurers, who will begin planning for 2019 sometime in the next few months. If the carriers know the federal government has restored the payments and is investing in outreach and, more important, if they see Congress acting to bolster insurance markets where they are weak, they are more likely to continue offering policies. That still makes it a hard sell, particularly among conservative Republicans. On Wednesday, the office of House Speaker Paul Ryan, RWIS, released an official statement saying nothing in the Alexander Murray proposal alters Ryan's view that the Senate should keep its focus on repeal and replace of Obamacare. Some Republicans are already talking about modifying the proposal in ways that could make it toxic for Democrats. But particularly if Republicans worry they will take the blame for rising premiums this year, a very real possibility, given that polls show most Americans now hold Republicans responsible for management of the health care system. GOP leaders could pass the Alexander Murray proposal, or something like it, by attaching it to larger, must-pass legislation. The spending bill that Congress will have to approve in December, in order to keep the government running, is the obvious candidate for this. That makes the bill's show of support important, particularly because it represents not just both parties but also different factions within the parties. Among the CO sponsors are mainstream conservatives such as Senators Richard Burr, RN.C., Johnny Isakson, RGA, and Mike Rounds, RS.D., as well as relative moderates like Susan Collins, R. Maine, John McCain, R. Arizona, and Lisa Murkowski, R. Alaska. The CO sponsors from the Democratic caucus include members representing a similarly wide ideological spectrum, with relatively liberal senators, like Tammy Baldwin, DWIS, and Al Franken, DMIN, along with relative moderates such as Heidi Heitkamp, DN.D, Angus King, I. Maine, and Joe Manchin, DW. Virginia. Alexander and Murray are also drawing support from beyond Capitol Hill. A bipartisan group of 10 governors, including 3 Republicans and 1 Republican-turned-independent, on Wednesday issued a letter supporting the proposal. Also on board are a wide array of healthcare organizations, all of whom, like most of those governors, had strongly opposed repeal legislation when it came up earlier this year. Perhaps the most interesting comments of the day actually came from one of those Republican CO sponsors, Murkowski, who spoke immediately after Alexander and Murray and praised the pair for their cooperation. "It's not only good from a policy perspective," she said, "it's good from the perspective of the health of our institution." Back in July, Murkowski was one of 3 Republicans to vote against repeal legislation the Senate was considering, thereby preventing its passage. One of her big objections was the process that led to the vote, a rush to craft a bill without formal hearings or deliberation, or any serious attempt to win bipartisan support. On Thursday, Murkowski didn't say explicitly that she viewed the Alexander Murray proposal as a better way to legislate. But the point was clear enough. Cross-posted from TomDispatch.com. Gladiatorial contests were the sport of choice of the Roman Empire for more than 650 years. Losing gladiators were regularly wounded or killed, outcomes in which the audience often had the final say, thumbs up or down or a closed fist with 2 fingers extended. Such decisions were reportedly accompanied by screams of "let him go," or "slay him." These days, it's hard to imagine such crowds in arenas absorbing those imperial bread and circus events carried out by Roman captives, slaves, or often desperate free men and ex-soldiers, or sometimes even women, some of whom became stars of their moment. As Evan Andrews has written at History.com, their portraits grace the walls of many public places. Children played with gladiator action figures made of clay, and the most successful fighters even endorsed products just like the top athletes of today. All of this should, of course, sound at least faintly familiar. It's now common knowledge that, in America's blood sport of choice, the players, generally men of color, essentially beat each other into states just short of death over the years, or so the latest information on brain damage and football would indicate. This isn't a subject that's still awaiting definitive research, though such research continues, or in any way in doubt. And yet professional football, which, according to Gallup, superseded the slower, quieter, so much less violent baseball as the national pastime in 1972, just as the Vietnam War was grinding to an end, and in this century left baseball in the dust, ignored the issue of brain injury for years. It's reasonable, in fact, to think of football as America's version of the Roman imperial pastime, even if our arenas aren't just stadiums but living rooms, dining rooms, bars, and these days more or less anywhere you happen to be with your personal version of a screen. Recently, in the manner of a modern emperor offering bread and circuses to the masses, Donald Trump placed professional football, especially its violence, at the very center of our overheated, overtweeted politics. In reality, everyone should be disgusted by a game which batters not just the limbs of its players but their brains in monstrous ways, and by a president who calls for yet more of it. I certainly am, but let me just add that I've been a football fan since my father took me, at age 6 in 1950, to see the Brooklyn team in the soon-to-expire American Football League. This year, my team, the New York Giants, are 1-5 and launched on a season even more dismal than that of baseball's New York Mets last summer. So I'm almost ready to stop watching, but to fully fess up, gross as I find the brain damage aspect of the game, I still find myself watching, which, I believe, makes me a bona fide imperial spectator doing everything but shouting "slay him" at the screen. To make amends, let me offer you Tom Dispatch's regular jock culture correspondent, Robert Lipsyte, so that, in Trump's game plan, he can do what I haven't yet brought myself to do and offer a thumbs down to Donald Trump's game of games.